The Silent Harvest. Commander Vex stood at the observation deck of Station K447, his compound eyes scanning the vast agricultural domes below. The insectoid officer's antenna twitched with frustration as he watched another section of the hydroponic gardens turn brown and wither. 3 months ago, this frontier colony had been thriving, producing enough food to support 5,000 inhabitants and export surplus to neighboring systems. Now, they were rationing emergency supplies and watching their crops die for reasons no one could explain. The colony's chief botanist, a gelatinous quellan named Morse, oozed up beside him. "Commander, the latest sensor sweeps show nothing. No bacterial contamination, no fungal infections, no viral signatures. The plants are simply failing, and we cannot determine why." Vex's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Impossible. Nothing dies without a cause. Have you recalibrated the molecular scanners?" "7 times, sir. We have brought in equipment from 4 different worlds. Every analysis returns the same result. The plants are healthy until suddenly they are not. It is as if something is consuming them from within, but our technology detects nothing." This was the 4th colony to report such failures in as many months. The Galactic Agricultural Commission had declared it a priority crisis. Millions could starve if the pattern continued spreading. Vex had requested their best xenobotanists, their most advanced diagnostic equipment, and unlimited resources. What he received instead was a single human in worn coveralls carrying an ancient-looking backpack. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle with an easy confidence that immediately annoyed Vex. Humans had only joined the galactic community 2 decades ago, yet they carried themselves as if they owned the universe. She was small by most species standards, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Commander Vex." She extended her hand in the odd human greeting gesture. "Sarah Chen, I understand you have a pest problem." Vex ignored the hand. "Dr. Chen, with respect, we requested expert assistance. The Galactic Commission sends us a human who specializes in what you call pest control. We have sophisticated AI systems, molecular-level spanners, and the finest scientific minds in 3 sectors working on this crisis. What exactly can you offer that we do not already possess?" Sarah's smile never wavered. "A different perspective, Commander. Sometimes the most advanced technology misses what simple observation can reveal. May I see the affected areas?" Against his better judgment, Vex led her to Hydroponic Dome 7, one of the worst affected sections. Rows of what should have been thriving grain stalks stood brown and dying. The air smelled of decay despite the filtration systems working at full capacity. Sarah walked slowly between the rows, occasionally stopping to touch a plant, smell the soil, or simply stand still and observe. She pulled out what appeared to be an ancient magnifying glass from her pack, examining stems and leaves with intense concentration. Vex watched with growing impatience as she spent 20 minutes doing what their sensors could accomplish in seconds. "Your scanners are looking for known pathogens," Sarah finally said, still examining a wilted stalk. "Bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites in the standard galactic database. But they're not finding anything because what you're dealing with isn't in any database." "Impossible," Morse burbled. "Our databases contain information on over 10 million pathogenic organisms from 1,000 worlds." "Exactly," Sarah replied, pulling out a small collection kit. "But this organism is new. Or rather, it's been here all along, and you've been feeding it exactly what it needs to thrive." She carefully scraped something invisible into a sterile container. "Commander, can you tell me about the atmospheric composition in these domes?" Vex rattled off the specifications from memory. Standard oxygen-nitrogen mix, 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, optimal for most agricultural species. And the soil composition? Synthesized from local minerals, enriched with standard nutrient compounds. The same formula used successfully on 40 colony worlds. Sarah nodded slowly, still examining her sample under the magnifying glass. "There's your problem. You've created a perfect environment for something you didn't know existed. Commander, have you ever heard of extremophiles?" The term meant nothing to Vex, but he gestured her to continue. On Earth, we discovered microorganisms living in the most hostile environments imaginable. Bacteria in volcanic vents, archaea and frozen Arctic ice, organisms that thrive in acid or radiation or complete darkness. Life finds a way to exist in places we thought were impossible. Sarah held up her sample container. This planet has its own extremophiles, microscopic organisms that exist in the native soil, dormant and harmless in natural conditions. But when you created these perfect growing environments with synthesized soil and optimized atmospheres, you gave them exactly what they needed to wake up and multiply. Our sensors would detect any microbial activity, Morse protested. Not if they're smaller than what your sensors are calibrated to find. Not if they exist in a state between what you classify as living and non-living. These organisms are consuming your plants at a molecular level, breaking down the cellular structures so gradually that it appears like natural withering. By the time you see the damage, they've already spread throughout the entire plant. Vex felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. If what you say is true, how do we stop them? Sterilization protocols? Atmospheric purging? That's the instinct, isn't it? Sarah said softly. Kill the threat. Eliminate the pest. But Commander, that's exactly the wrong approach. These organisms aren't invaders. They're native to this world. You're the invaders, and you've disrupted a balanced ecosystem. Sterilization might work temporarily, but they'll come back. They're part of this planet. Then what do you propose? Vex demanded. We cannot simply abandon this colony. Thousands depend on these crops. Sarah's eyes gleamed with excitement. We don't abandon it. We adapt it. Commander, on Earth, we learned something that most advanced civilizations seem to have forgotten. The best pest control isn't about elimination. It's about balance. It's about working with nature instead of against it. She pulled out a small data pad and began sketching rapidly. These organisms are consuming your crops because there's nothing else for them to eat and no natural predators to keep their population in check. But if we introduce certain organisms from Earth, bacteria that establish symbiotic relationships with plants, we can create a competitive environment. The Earth bacteria will occupy the same ecological niche, but instead of harming the plants, they'll protect them. It's not just pest control, it's ecosystem engineering. Vex's antenna twitched rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his species. The proposal was radical, unorthodox, and completely contrary to standard protocols. The Galactic Commission would never approve such an experiment under normal circumstances, but these were not normal circumstances. 3 colonies had already been evacuated. Food supplies across 2 sectors were reaching critical levels. Conventional methods had failed completely. How long would this take to implement? He asked carefully. I can begin immediately. I brought samples of the necessary Earth organisms with me. We'll start with a small test plot, monitor the results carefully, and expand if successful. If I'm right, you should see improvement within 48 hours. And if you are wrong? Sarah met his compound gaze steadily. Then we've lost 48 hours and 1 test plot. But Commander, I'm not wrong. I've seen this pattern before on Earth. Different organisms, different crops, but the same fundamental principle. Life doesn't exist in isolation. It exists in balance. Your advanced technology tried to create perfection, but perfection is sterile. What you need is controlled chaos, the messy reality of a functioning ecosystem. Vex made his decision. You have 48 hours, Dr. Chen, but I'm assigning a security team to monitor your work constantly. If there is any sign that your Earth organisms are causing additional problems, we will implement full sterilization protocols immediately. Fair enough, Sarah agreed, already unpacking her equipment. Just promise me one thing, Commander. Keep an open mind. What I'm about to show you might look strange, might seem primitive compared to your technology, but sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. As Sarah began her work, carefully introducing microscopic Earth organisms into the sick soil, Vex watched with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. The human worked with surprising precision, measuring and mixing compounds with the care of an artist. She sang softly to herself as she worked, some Earth melody he did not recognize. In the observation room above, other colony administrators gathered to watch this strange experiment. Most were expressions of doubt. A few placed quiet bets on how spectacularly it would fail.
But as the first day passed and sensors began detecting unusual chemical signatures in the test plot, Vex noticed something that made his antenna stand straight up in alarm. The microscopic organisms Sarah warned about, the ones causing all the damage, they were not dying. Instead, they were changing, evolving, adapting to the presence of the Earth bacteria at a rate that should have been impossible. And they were spreading faster than ever before.
The Harmony Protocol. The emergency alarm shattered the night cycle silence of Station K447. Commander Vex raced toward the command center, his exoskeleton clicking rapidly against the metal floors. Every screen displayed the same horrifying data. The microscopic organisms had spread beyond Hydroponic Dome 7 and were now detected in the life support filtration systems, the water recycling plants, and even the backup oxygen generators. Dr. Sarah Chen was already in the command center when he arrived, her eyes fixed on the cascading data streams. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from 36 hours without sleep, but her expression showed concentration rather than panic. "Explain this, Dr. Chen," Vex demanded, his voice sharp with controlled fury. "You said your Earth organisms would create balance. Instead, we now have contamination spreading throughout critical systems. The Colony Council is demanding immediate sterilization protocols." Sarah held up a hand without looking away from the screens. "Commander, I need you to trust me for 12 more hours. What we're seeing isn't contamination spreading, it's communication." "Communication?" Morse oozed forward, his gelatinous form rippling with agitation. "These are mindless microorganisms. They do not communicate. They simply consume and multiply." "That's what I thought too at first," Sarah said, finally turning to face them. Her fingers flew across a keyboard, pulling up molecular analysis data. "But look at these chemical signatures. The organisms aren't randomly spreading. They're moving in patterns, leaving chemical trails that other organisms follow. They're not attacking the life support systems, they're exploring them. They're trying to understand their environment." Vex's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "You are suggesting these microscopic creatures possess intelligence?" "Not intelligence as we define it, but awareness, collective behavior. Think of it like ants or bees on Earth. Individual organisms with simple functions, but together they create complex systems and make what looks like intelligent decisions." Sarah pulled up another screen showing time-lapse footage of the organism's movement patterns. "Watch how they interact with the Earth bacteria I introduced. They're not fighting for resources, they're dancing around each other, testing boundaries, trying to establish communication protocols." The footage did show something unusual. The organisms moved in swirling patterns, approaching the Earth bacteria, retreating, approaching again, in what almost looked like deliberate interaction. It was unlike any microbial behavior in the galactic databases. "Even if what you say is true," Vex argued, "it does not change the fact that they are destroying our crops and now threatening life support. I cannot risk 5,000 lives on a theory about dancing microbes." Sarah's jaw tightened with determination. "Then don't risk it on theory. Risk it on evidence. Commander, I need to tell you something about my background that wasn't in my official file." She pulled up a holographic image from her personal data storage. It showed a younger Sarah standing in what appeared to be a devastated agricultural zone on Earth, with withered crops stretching to the horizon. 15 years ago, the American Midwest experienced what they called the Gray Death. Crops across 3,000 square kilometers died within weeks. No known pathogen, no explanation. It looked exactly like what's happening here. The government wanted to burn everything, sterilize the entire region. I was a graduate student then, studying soil microbiology, and I had a crazy theory. She advanced the images, showing laboratory work and field tests.
I discovered that massive flooding from climate change had disturbed ancient soil layers, releasing dormant organisms that had existed in balance for thousands of years. When modern agricultural practices disrupted that balance, these organisms had no ecological role, so they consumed what was available, our crops. "What did you do?" Morse asked, genuinely curious now. "I introduced companion organisms, bacteria and fungi that could coexist with the dormant species, giving them a purpose in the ecosystem instead of leaving them to destroy it. Everyone said I was insane. My own professors tried to stop me. But within 72 hours, the crops stopped dying. Within a week, they were healthier than before. The organisms that were killing everything became beneficial, producing compounds that enhance growth and disease resistance. The Gray Death became the Gray Miracle. That zone now produces 30% higher yields than anywhere else on Earth. Not because we killed the problem, but because we understood it and worked with it. That's what I'm trying to do here, Commander, but I need time." Vex looked at the spreading contamination data, then back at Sarah's earnest face. Every instinct trained into him by military service screamed to implement sterilization immediately. Cut losses, eliminate threats, protect the chain of command. But something in Sarah's story resonated with a deeper wisdom that her species' rush toward technological supremacy might have forgotten. 12 hours, he said finally. "But I am evacuating non-essential personnel to the orbital station. If your organisms breach the command center environmental seals, I will have no choice but to act." "Understood," Sarah said, already moving toward the door. "I need to get back to Dome 7. The key to this whole situation is there." "I am coming with you," Vex announced, surprising himself. "If this is to be humanity's solution to our crisis, I should witness it firsthand." They rode the transport tunnel to Dome 7 in tense silence. Sarah clutched her equipment pack like a lifeline, occasionally checking readings on her portable scanner. When they entered the dome, Vex immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. The smell of decay had been replaced by something earthy and vital, like fresh soil after rain. The test plot Sarah had treated looked dramatically different from the surrounding areas. The plants stood taller, greener, with visible new growth. But more striking was what Vex's enhanced vision could perceive in the ultraviolet spectrum. The entire plot glowed with subtle bioluminescent patterns, webs of light connecting plant roots to soil to air in an intricate network. It was unlike any microbial behavior in the galactic databases. "Do you see it?" Sarah whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "The network is forming. The Earth bacteria are establishing communication pathways with the native organisms. They're teaching them a new way to exist." She knelt beside a particularly healthy plant and carefully extracted a soil sample. Under her portable microscope, she showed Vex something remarkable. The native organisms and Earth bacteria were not just coexisting, they had formed symbiotic clusters, working together to break down nutrients and feed them to the plants in forms that enhance growth and disease resistance. "This is what I was hoping for," Sarah explained. "The native organisms were never meant to be destructive. They're decomposers, designed to break down dead organic matter and recycle nutrients. But in your synthesized environment, there was no dead matter, only living plants. So they adapted, consuming what was available. By introducing Earth bacteria that could form proper relationships with living plants, we gave the native organisms a partner species. Now they're working together to create a healthy ecosystem." "But why are they spreading through the station?" Vex asked. Her expression turned serious. "Because they're looking for balance throughout the entire colony. Your life support systems, your water recycling, your air filtration, they're all sterile, artificial. These organisms sense the imbalance, and they're trying to correct it. They're not attacking, Commander. They're trying to heal. That is insane, Vex protested, but his tone lacked conviction. Is it? Think about it. Your people built this colony using pure technology, eliminating every microorganism, creating a completely sterile environment. But nature abhors a vacuum. When you introduce plants and soil, you opened a door. The native organisms are trying to establish what every healthy ecosystem needs: diversity, complexity, interconnection. Sarah stood and faced him directly. Commander, I'm proposing something radical. Instead of fighting these organisms, instead of sterilizing systems that don't need to be sterile, let's work with them. Let me introduce carefully selected Earth organisms throughout the colony's biological systems. Let's create a true ecosystem instead of a sterile box. The risks, Vex began, are less than you think. I've mapped the biochemistry. Earth organisms and native organisms are compatible. They can coexist, create balance. But more than that, they can create something better than what you had before. A colony that doesn't fight against the planet it's built on, but works with it. Vex